Magdalen Street is a thin, grey artery in Norwich that feels older than time itself. It's the kind of place where wind carries the smell of damp brick and old secrets. Number 19 stands squat, a 300-year-old custodian that has worn many faces. A brewery, a shoe shop, a home for reptiles, a charity shop, and now an upcycled vintage clothing store. But beneath the layers of paint and rotating signage, there's a static, heavy presence that doesn't care for commerce. It's the ghost of a woman named Sara. They say she was a working girl back in the 1860s. At that time, the ground floor was a rough drinking den called the Quay Merchants' Arms. The upper floors were reserved for the oldest profession in town. The Victorian tragedy was maybe over a disagreement about money, or perhaps Sara's refusal to go up into the attic. But in its finality, her life ended with his hands around her neck. For Sara was strangled, her life snuffed out in a room small and cold at the very top of the house. The city has moved on, but Sara stayed to become the building's silent, restless partner. Over the decades, staff and visitors identified the attic and staircase leading to it as the centre of paranormal activity. A shadowy figure was often reported lurking on the stairs, and a spectral mist was once observed in the corridors near the top of the building. Although private accounts suggest paranormal activity started soon after her murder, the local whisper became a scream by the early 1970s. At that time, Pat Simmons, who worked for Radio Rentals, was reported to have heard the clattering keys of a phantom typewriter in an upstairs room. Although the building and adjacent ones were all known to be empty, she reported hearing heavy, deliberate footsteps on the floors above, and she often felt that she was being watched over by an unseen entity. Oxfam became the next tenant. Its volunteers would arrive to find the contents of bin bag donations strewn across the floor like a frantic, silent protest. But the detail that truly chills to the bone happened in a room that had been double-locked overnight from the outside. When the volunteer returned in the morning to open the door, they found women's garments had been emptied from a bin bag with every single item neatly and perfectly folded. It wasn't the work of a thief, it was the domestic echo of a woman who was, perhaps, trying to find order in the chaos of her own afterlife. It's an image that sticks. The silence of a locked room and a pile of phantom folded lace and wool. On another occasion, Sara is thought to have triggered an icy draft that caused the Oxfam manager to freeze as if paralysed from the hips down. Unable to walk, he watched as a rack of clothes mysteriously moved. A blue-tinged swirl hung over the rack before gently floating upstairs. The paranormal activity became so relentless it caused a sharp decline in volunteers. People didn't want to be alone in the stockrooms. When the building shifted to become Ron's Reptiles in the 1990s, the energy turned even harsher. Dogs would stop at the threshold, hackles raised, refusing to step inside. Snakes wouldn't thrive, and lizards would die for no reason. Matters reached a wild climax when a fire exit sign, screwed tightly to the masonry, suddenly ripped itself free and flew across the room like a projectile, slamming into the owner's shoulder with enough force to send him to hospital for an X-ray. It's a specific kind of haunting, not just a bump in the night. but a deliberate, intelligent manipulation of the physical world. Other tenants found the psychological toll even worse. Imagine opening your shop to find every single mirror, items that were fixed or heavy, turned perfectly to face the wall. Or to find every cabinet in the store meticulously sealed shut with tape. Or to find cushions on the sofa deliberately turned upside down when they hadn't been left that way the night before. The Lowestoft Borderline Science Investigation Group once spent a night there sitting in the dark with their recorders and their nerves. They watched as the lights in the front showroom were switched off by an invisible hand. One investigator, while in the upstairs toilet, watched in frozen silence as the locked door swung violently open of its own accord. At some point in its history, an owner decided to hold a séance and actually managed to get through to Sara. She told them her sad story, at which point it became clear the poor girl didn't even know that she'd died. According to many beliefs, a spirit may not realise its physical body has died, often due to strong attachments, denial or confusion. The suggestion is that some spirits might need help recognising that they've moved beyond the physical realm. An exorcism was indeed performed sometime in the 1980s to try and give Sara the peace that she'd never found. The building was exorcised not once but twice by members of different families. Whether these gave Sara the reconciliation she'd craved is unknown. Yet, for some time now, the building does seem to have been quiet. But the history of a place like 19 Magdalen Street isn't easily erased. Some 20-odd years ago, a customer was reportedly seen sprinting from the back of the shop straight out the front door. It wasn't known what they'd seen in the shadows drifting behind the clothes racks, but their face was said to have been drained of all colour. If Sara is still there, she might be the draft that catches the back of your neck when you're browsing the vintage coats, or the shadow on the stairs that vanishes when you blink. She's a reminder that some tragedies don't end with a burial. They just wait for the lights to go out.